On the evening of Thursday, the 14th of January 2016, we know Sadie Hartley was alone at a home address, and during the course of the evening she was brutally murdered within the hallway of a home address. Sadie lived with a partner, Ian Johnston. At the time of the offence he was away, he was out of the country skiing, so it was imperative that we made contact with him to try and identify, if there was any reason why this offence could have taken place, because at the early stages there didn't seem to be any reason why someone would attend the address at Helmshire and commit this dreadful, dreadful crime. As a result of the interviews with Ian Johnston, our suspicions began to fall upon Sarah Williams. Probably about 2 or 3 years prior to the incident taking place, Ian Johnston had had a brief relationship with the defendant, Sarah Williams. This was only brief, and very quickly the relationship ended. However, despite the brief nature of the relationship, it was very, very apparent that Sarah Williams had become quite obsessed with Ian and was not prepared to let this relationship end. Following the arrest of Sarah, further suspicions then began to fall upon her good friend Katrina Walsh. We began to assemble a picture, a jigsaw for want of a better term, about the life of Sadie, the life of Ian, and also of Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh. We worked tirelessly over many, many days and weeks initially. A lot of traditional police inquiries, house-to-house inquiries, CCTV evidence, and ultimately, the forensic examination of the home address of both Sadie and, more importantly, of Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh was instrumental in building a very, very good prosecution case. We recovered the DNA of Sadie Hartley on the bath of Sarah Williams. We also recovered a pair of spectacles of Sarah Williams from her Volvo. They were examined and they had a very, very minute trace of blood on one of the lenses. Clearly that was a significant step for the investigation. We know they travelled to Germany to buy a stun gun. Stun gun was recovered. Again, that has been forensically examined, and Sadie had some injuries to her cheek, which clearly showed that the stun gun had been used. We know that Katrina Walsh enters the Tesco store, and we know she purchases a large carving knife, which Sarah Williams subsequently uses. We managed to identify that they bought a car, a Renault Clio, in order to commit the offence. That was recovered. It was heavily blood-stained, and again the CCTV evidence gave us some good prosecution evidence. Another significant find was at the home address of Katrina Walsh, who is clearly an avid diary writer. The diary entries of Katrina Walsh were very, very damning. Both Williams and Walsh had planned this horrendous crime for over 18 months. Gave a very good picture of the kind of thought process of these two people, where she talks about killing Sadie Hartley. This really sums it up for me, where she says, "I have no moral qualms, just a serious don't let us get caught twinge." The diaries, they talk about plans they have about covering the tracks. They are discussing and planning murdering somebody. There was clearly a steely determination to get rid of Sadie Hartley. We know a week before the actual offence taking place that both Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh again visited the area on Sunnybank Road before going to Tesco's nearby and purchasing a bunch of chrysanthemums. We know from CCTV evidence recovered that both Katrina Walsh and Sarah Williams then visited Sadie, whilst Katrina Walsh knocked on the door and handed the flowers to Sadie. Sarah Williams was probably 20 feet away, hiding behind the car, Sadie Hartley's car, so she could probably get a visual on Sadie Hartley, so she knew who the lady was she was going to attack exactly a week later, to the hour, to the minute even almost. So I think it was a sinister act, but that was all part of the bigger picture. This was all part of this meticulous planning over 18 months. We then know that Katrina Walsh and Sarah Williams left the area visited the Holden Arms public house nearby, again to have a drink and talk about their despicable plans. And then we know that Sarah Williams went back on that very same night down to the address and to have a good look at Sunnybank Road. We know that Sadie had been working during the day, that she returned home late afternoon, early evening time, and then went out to a stables to tend to a horse. And then we know she returned probably about 7:30ish, I think, certainly early evening, to a home address on Sunnybank Road where she was home alone. We know that Katrina Walsh and Sarah Williams met at the home address of Sarah Williams before Sarah Williams made the journey across from Chester. So her home address was on Treeborth Road. She then made the way across to Lancashire and Helmshire, whilst Katrina Walsh stayed at the home address of Sarah Williams, awaiting the call to say, come and collect me. And again, the CCTV evidence from around that address was very, very damning for both. We know the Renault Clio was parked a short distance away from Treeborth Road, and this is the vehicle that Sarah Williams used to drive across to Lancashire. The CCTV from Sunnybank Road, of which there are various different opportunities, clearly shows the Renault Clio driving up the close and turning round in the cul-de-sac at the end, and then coming back down. It passes Sadie's home address and then it parks up at the far end of Sunnybank Road. The CCTV then shows Sarah Williams approach the address, and it then shows her return approximately 4.5 minutes later. Within those 4.5 minutes, sadly, she'd knocked on the door of Sadie. Sadie had answered, and then Sarah Williams has attacked her in what I can only describe as a frenzied attack, and sadly, Sadie suffered absolutely appalling injuries, and I would suggest very quickly lost the fight for life. Sarah Williams can be seen leaving via the CCTV, making her way back to a car, and then we plot that car as it travels all the way back from Helmshire back to the car park in Ellesmere Port. The CCTV evidence then shows Katrina Walsh going to collect her in Katrina Walsh's own car, which I believe is a Vauxhall Astra, before they both return back to Sarah Williams' home address, and then they begin their clean-up operation. Clearly Sarah Williams, I would suggest, showered at the address, which is why we recovered blood from the bath, DNA from the bath, and we know that Katrina Walsh returned to her home address on Hare Lane nearby, and again began to dispose of the evidence to cut up the clothing, to try and destroy the boots that Sarah Williams had bought. And then subsequently we know that Katrina Walsh went to Collins Farm, where she began to discard the evidence and hide the evidence. Subsequently, when arrested and interviewed, she made a reasonable number of admissions in relation to her involvement, and took members of the investigation team back to Collins Farm, where we recovered the stun gun, we recovered some diary notes, and we recovered the murder weapon itself. All of which both implicated Sarah Williams, but also Katrina Walsh. Katrina Walsh made reference in a diary to, I can't believe what we're doing, but they've had many, many months and years even for Katrina Walsh to say, no, this cannot happen, or, to report it to the local police, but they haven't done. This is not, as I said, this is not a momentary lapse of control or loss of control. This is premeditated, this is planned. This is almost an assassination of a totally innocent lady, a lady in her 60s who's never done anything wrong in her life, and loses her life in the most horrendous circumstances that I can imagine. Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh are not the only people with a life sentence in respect to what's happened, because you know, Charlotte, Harry, Gary, Ian Johnston and the siblings of Sadie, I'm not sure, you know, we'll ever get over it. You know, they have a very different life now. You know, they have to try and get used to a new normality, which is incredibly difficult for them. You know, we will continue to work with them. They are wonderful people, they are a wonderful family. You know, we are committed as an organisation to make sure we give them as much support as we can. You know, my concern is for the family of Sadie and Sadie herself, really. You know, I'm pleased that as an organisation that we've managed to get justice for Sadie and for Sadie's family.
Well, I just got engaged about 3 days before I got the phone call, so I was from an incredible high to an incredible low. It was just undescribable. You obviously, you never think it would happen to you, and that moment in time, all you want to do is be back home. But I knew she wasn't going to be there when I got back anyway.
The family just take each day as it comes. That's all we can do at the moment. Obviously, you know, personally, I've got grandchildren that I look after. I've got a wife that we're very supportive of each other, but we do take each day as it comes. But Sadie's death has just left a massive hole in all our lives which will never be filled, and we will never ever get over this. We never will. She's always going to be missed, and there'll be times throughout our lives where we think Sadie should have been here now to be part of this family time.
Just for the inspiration she was to many people. She just literally lit up a room. She was just perfect. There was nothing bad about her that anybody could say. She was just a lovely, trustworthy, kind, loving woman. She just cared about everybody.